is actually item 5, the declaration of interest. And I understand, Sandy, that you have some corrections to make to that.
Just, I might, Your Worship, correct Councillor Vandervis's advised of a change to his. And so the first item in his declaration should say that there is no conflict identified. And that was passed on to us and we neglected to make the change.
Okay, so I'll move from the Chair the recommendation on page 5 that the Council amends the elected members' interest. Second, the Councillor Staines and confirms the proposed management plan. Are there any further speakers to that? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay. The next one is item 6, the minor extension of the alcohol restriction area.
Happy to move.
I'll just jot you down and get through questions and then I'll come back to you. Who is the receiver? Oh yes, Councillor Wilson has joined the meeting.
Yes, hello, welcome.
You're definitely there, Councillor Wilson. Good.
Thank you. I have a question.
We lost contact.
You've got a question.
He's got a question.
Okay. Let's start with any questions that anyone has of this report of Simon. Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. My question is really around the references made to further possible investigations around extensions to this liquor ban in other parts of the central city. And I'm just wondering what the resolution of council or the relevant committee was that started that process.
Through Your Worship, I don't have that answer to me, I'm afraid, unless Christy can remember. No, sorry, I don't have that answer. There's something that came up through a previous meeting, and it's something that the police have approached us about in the past. And that's why, given the nature of the scope of that ban, potential ban, it would be something that we'd have to do further consultation on.
Certainly, and that is foreshadowed in this. But just so I'm clear, it's been inserted into our regulatory services work program by the desire of the police rather than any committee of this body.
I would have to check whether there's any specific resolution addressing that, but it's something that the police have been talking to us about for a while.
And are staff comfortable with the capacity we currently have, particularly from a policy point of view, in delivering the work program as it already exists, giving effect to resolutions of this council without accommodating further requests from other institutions to do more policy work on their behalf?
The bulk of the work would be initially on the police to try and articulate the required, I suppose, that the actual requirement for a bylaw in the first place before we even got to the point of doing any further consultation. What we've struggled with in the past, particularly in this instance of doing the smaller review, was to find adequate evidence of alcohol-related harm. And before we would do anything, that's really on the police to provide that information at this stage. We're nowhere near that. But I guess that would be something that we could discuss through the chairs about whether it's an appropriate piece of work to even embark on.
Councillor Wilson, you have a question.
It's one I've given to Adrian earlier. On page 31 of the agenda, I was just wondering whether the bridge on the road, I can't see it in there, I understand it's meant to be, nor is it on the picture.
Page 31 is the map.
I didn't understand the question.
So what else? Yeah.
I can't do that.
Yeah.
So I understand, Councillor Wilson, that it's already taken into account, already covered?
Sorry?
The bridge is already covered by the liquor ban, councillor.
Oh, okay. So this is, but if I look on that page, I can't see it in there.
Yeah, we'll have a look at that, but we understand it is intended to be covered, so we will make sure it is.
So, in page 31, if I look at Schedule B, there is no bridges included in that statement, and it's excluded from the diagram.
Yes, but our intention is that it be covered, and we'll make sure that it is, councillor.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Wiley.
Simon, do you think there's any way of communicating, if this passes, that we'd be able to communicate the liquor ban area a lot more effectively, and especially off-licence premises? I noted that that's going to be one of the hardest parts, is communicating to people.
Through the chair, that's always our challenge, communicating ban areas, whether it's an area where you can or cannot consume alcohol or bring a dog. The signage has to be of a specified nature, so and we have to have it up fairly high because it does get vandalised. However, there probably are other ways that we can look at communicating that, so that's something based on some of the feedback we've heard today that we'll look at. About more effective ways of communicating when you're entering a liquor ban area.
So, just a quick thought I had, and I talked to Ian Paul as he was leaving. So something like a sticker or a map at off-licence premises within the liquor ban area, or something in a prominent place. So anybody purchasing, say, at any of these premises, you know, the liquor stores and stuff, that they would walk out and they would see that actually they're in a liquor ban area, and they'd have to go outside a certain area? Yes, that's right. That's something we could look at. Yeah.
Right. Further questions? Now, I understand this it's been moved by Councillor Vandervis. You seconded, Councillor Wiley?
I'll second.
Oh, you did. Councillor Hall. Right. Councillor Vandervis, do you wish to speak to this?
Just very briefly, it's option 2, the recommended option, that I think is quite appropriate. In the interest of the getting people to understand a fairly complex and added number of areas, I thought that perhaps if Simon might like to consider getting a nice clear map of the additional areas and putting it in the for your information, because for your information is something which a lot of people read anyway. It's a way of distributing it without too much cost, and it might have to run across 2 sections of it, but yeah, that's the only thing to get round the issue of people not really understanding. Otherwise, I don't think that this particular recommendation has any downside at all that I could see, but I look forward to hearing more questions.
Well, Councillor Hall.
With your identifying the areas, I've noticed up north in some of the towns and cities, they actually put where you've got a pedestrian cross and they have pedestrians give way to traffic. Could we put a stamp on the footpath entering the liquor area and replicate that?
Other cities have done that, and it's something that other cities have used for other ban areas, like for dogs, for example. But there is that risk that you end up with graffiti on the path. That's something that we'd have to look at, the impact of it. But it's one thing that cities have done, but there may be some cleverer ideas that are still visible but not so ugly perhaps, but it's something we can look at.
Councillor Benson-Clark,
Thank you, Your Worship. Let's not overcook this, please. This should have been agreed by council a year ago, and because it wasn't, a number of individuals, and the press are present, so I'm not going to go into this too much, but a number of individuals have been really seriously disadvantaged. And as far as I'm concerned, the people, wherever they live in this city, should be able to enjoy the quiet peace of their own home without inconsiderate behaviour, or at least without inconsiderate and inappropriate behaviour being sanctioned by this community, by the police and by the rest of the citizenry. And I think we've dropped the ball here, and I think we can correct this little part of it right now, within a week or two. That, I think, the need for that should be obvious for anyone who was here earlier in the day, and it should be even more obvious if you read the material that was circulated. The sort of direct threat and intimidating behaviour that some of the people in the city have received as a result of objecting to drunken dipsticks keeping them awake all night is totally unacceptable, and I'm not convinced that the comments by Sergeant Paulin reflect the activities of the police. I think the behaviour of the police in this area has been seriously wanting, and the one thing that I hope we will follow up on assiduously is ensuring that they actually do what they're supposed to be doing in terms of protecting the rights of our citizens, no matter how thin the blue line might be stretched. In terms of our own responsibilities, I think we've dealt with them responsibly and thoroughly. I know that there are properties that have already received abatement notices. I know that we are good, I'm told, at responding to noise control complaints, and the security guards who do that work, I'm sure, have a fine collection of stereo and other digital appliances ready for a good auction sale sometime. But that's only part of it. I want to see the police actually doing their bit, and the tool we are giving them with this change, they welcome and say will assist in the control of the sort of offensive behaviour that shouldn't be happening, or it certainly shouldn't be happening on a continuing basis in the same places month after month after month.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship, and I have no issue with the proposed amendment to the mapped area, the minor extension being proposed here. But I do have some concern over the management of the work program on this institution. Councillor Benson-Pope has referred to the stretched nature of the thin blue line. Well, we're not an immune organisation to the kinds of resourcing challenges that eras of austerity present us with. In my previous tenure as Deputy Chair of Planning and Regulatory Committee, there's at least one bylaw we've made zero progress over the past 3 years. I mentioned when we signed off on our public art framework that there's a resolution of council passed 4.5 years ago that we haven't made particular progress on developing, let alone giving effect to. So it concerns me when we seem to struggle with the capacity to deliver on the work that is requested by this council and by our community, that then we'll drop everything and start a separate piece of work at the behest of the police, and no doubt not a small piece of work that will be to any proposal to extend a liquor ban into North Dunedin, in terms of occupying the time and energy and resources of this body. So I just wanted to sound that as a note of caution. I mean, I'm more than happy to be corrected if someone can find the resolution passed by council to ask for that piece of work to be started. But it is it's an ongoing challenge that we face, I think, and it's not helpful or holistic necessarily for things like this to be lobbed in seemingly as an afterthought into a report of this nature, dealing with a fairly minor and discrete amendment. Thanks.
Right. Councillor Vandervis, do you wish to exercise your right of reply?
All good, thank you.
Right, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Against? Carried.
Unanimous.
Let's move on to item 7, the future use of the Tonga School site. Right. Your second. clear questions up. So you might like to introduce them then, or just go straight to questions? Questions, councillors. Is there anything anyone needs clarification on? Councillor Garrett.
First of all, I'd like to thank the staff for the considerable amount of work that they've done on this project. It's much appreciated by the community. I just wanted to have clarified the point about the pool demolition, and just to have some reassurance that the majority of the community support this course of action.
Yes, during the expression of interest when we had the site tours, the pool was discussed, and the appetite that we've picked up is that the community identifies that it's past its operating life. The chair of the community board has also been in discussions with the pool committee, and that they've got some funds and how they look to use them in the community in a different way or a different area.
Any further questions? Councillor Lopez.
Thank you for your work. I'm just wondering what conversations you've had with the Ministry of Education in terms of projections of population, in terms of the future of the kindergarten in that suburb.
At this stage, we've not had any discussions with the Ministry of Education. We've been in discussions with the Anderson Bay Kindergarten, who have got a strong role and in a position where they can no longer stay in their current premises and are looking to relocate somewhere new.
No further questions? All right, it's been moved and seconded. Councillor Wiley, do you wish to speak to it?
Just that I think this is positive for the kindergarten. It's unfortunate that their current premises don't have a viable future, and I think it's a real good positive move for the Tomahawk community.
Any further speakers? Councillor Laufey.
I think I'm going to be opposing the recommendation, because I don't think that there has been enough. Not consultation, but negotiation as to whether the future of the kindergarten is actually going to be guaranteed, given that they're going to have to move into the Tomahawk area. So they're not moving far, but what I've been given to lead to believe that it's in terms of a long-term projection, it's not necessarily the best approach, maybe.
No further speakers? I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against?
Yes, sorry.
Carried. Okay, thank you. Now on to item 8, the Outer Wine Wharf removal. Questions again?
Can I just take the opportunity to say a few words? Sure. Right, as you'll see from the report, the Aramoana Wharf has been assessed by an expert engineer as being at significant risk of collapse. 7 of the 16 piles have completely rotted through. It is the engineer's view that while the superstructure, being the boardwalk and the barriers, may be suitable for reuse, it is unlikely that the piles could be utilised in any restoration effort. The risk of harm to individuals or those who continue to utilise the wharf, despite barriers and identification of risk, is significant. If the structure were to collapse and detach, it could also potentially pose a hazard to shipping in the nearby shipping channel. Jenny's also going to quickly cover some of the conversations we've had with the Department of Conservation and Otago Regional Council.
So in terms of the concession process, to begin with restoration, a concession is needed from the Department of Conservation, because one of the piles is on PCL land, which is public conservation land. To go through that concession, to apply for it, it is a $1,200 cost. However, we've had indications from the Department of Conservation that it would need to be a notified process, and that would allow for people who were opposing the wharf to submit. DOC has indicated that they would seek a commissioner from outside of Dunedin to come in for any hearings, and have indicated costs for that process to be around a minimum of $20,000. In discussions with them, a concession for the removal of that pile that's currently in the land, in the public conservation land. The Department of Conservation has indicated that they support the removal of that pile, and for it to be removed by sea and not crossing the ecological area, and that their view is that a concession in this context would not be necessary.
Question? Hawkins.
Not a question of mine, just that Councillor Wilson has indicated a willingness to move the resolution as per the order paper.
Councillor Wilson did, right?
Don't shoot the messenger. Councillor Noon.
Sorry?
I just said don't shoot the messenger.
Is there a seconder for that? While you're Councillor Vanders?
No, sorry. I want to, as a subsequential motion, flag that I'd like to move the 3 suggested motions from the ORC.
Okay, well, we'll come to that. Let's clear up questions first. Councillor Benson.
Is it possible to construct the wharf without using a pile on the public conservation land, and therefore avoid the need for a concession? It's the walkway to the beach, I assume, is it? I mean, I don't know where the boundaries are. Is that a possibility you've checked out?
That would involve so it wouldn't be in the same footprint, so we'd have to go through an ORC coastal permit process to do that, which we will need to go through eventually anyway.
My other question is in the context that when I read the report and looked at the photos again, as you said, half the piles are shagged would be a charitable description. And I don't know quite what's holding it up, probably the structure at the top. But the question raised from the public forum today was the possibility that reconstruction, which is in fact a rebuild, at the same time alongside the damaged and dilapidated structure, might be, if that were to proceed, might be a cheaper option, question mark, than a removal and engagement in a lengthy process for a concession, which is obviously going to be appealed, or highly likely to be appealed, and then a further later construction process using some recovered material should that be available. And so has there been any engineering investigation into the implications of different types of structural rebuild? You see what I mean? Simultaneous and driving new piles to hold the top instead of removing the whole lot and starting again.
No, we haven't given it any specific consideration, largely because we don't necessarily have funding available to go and deliver on another option, but certainly something we could consider.
Just on that note of concession, to be able to access the wharf from land, you would need a concession. The structure would need to be close to the land.
Councillor, it's not just an issue of the one part of the structure being retained.
Councillor Hawkins.
Thank you, and apologies for my absence at public forum. These things may have been canvassed then, but am I right in understanding that per this proposed motion for us to lodge an application to DOC for concession, so we would go through a publicly notified concession process and potentially subsequent appeals, and then a publicly notified coastal permit process. Is that how that would work?
The coastal permit, if it was just a community permit rather than a commercial permit, might not need to be notified. That would be, we'd have to seek further advice from the ORC on that.
What would the mechanism be, and how do you separate a commercial facility and a community facility? What would the mechanism be to stop commercial operators from using it were it constructed as a community asset?
At this stage, we don't necessarily have a mechanism for stopping that kind of activity.
And in terms of...
Sorry, I was just going to say that council would have the option of passing a bylaw to restrict use of a recreation asset to recreational users.
Far be it from me to add to the list of bylaws. What is the... I know this is an impossible how long is a piece of string question, but in terms of the cost of this process, I'm assuming if it's lodged in our name rather than council supporting an application lodged by an individual or community group, what are the rough order costs of going through this process as a publicly notified process?
So that's around, the indication we've been given is around 20,000 as a minimum, but it is, it's hard to determine depending on whether there's a number of appeals and how many people oppose or support the concession.
Councillor Vanders.
I've just spoken with Councillor Moon at the ORC, who seems to be of the opinion that the one problematic pile could simply just be topped and worked over the top of. Is that your understanding as well?
So, yes, we could remove or top that pile, and that wouldn't require a concession, but that would still leave the wharf in place as a risk, as the health and safety risk as noted in the report.
And the health and safety risk, if, as the regional council suggests, we arrange some additional barriers so that it becomes quite obvious that it is a risk, do you still think that that would be problematic for us, given that it's been like that for a very long time without any injuries or deaths?
I guess with regard to that, the marine risk is not mitigated by signage or additional barriers. What we've also found is 2 attempts at different types and styles of barriers have still resulted in people using the wharf for fishing and the like.
I just would like to clarify that's not the regional council position, that's the Aramoana League position, I think. The Charitable Trust, yes, not the ORC. So the ORC have actually indicated they're comfortable with the course of action that's been recommended by the staff in the report.
Pardon me, sorry, I misunderstood.
Okay, Councillor Stein.
I'm assuming that if you look at this photo, which sort of shows all the piles, that the pile in question is this one. So it's the one closest to the shore. Has to be. There's only one there. It's not the point that the ramp touches down. That will be in, I'm assuming the ramp touches down on dockland, and this pile is the pile. So if this pile's condition was sufficient to allow it to still be used, is a concession required to restore the rest of the structure which is not on dockland?
So the concession is, there's currently no concession for that pile, so that concession is required for the restoration of the wharf.
Councillor Hawkins.
Yeah, thank you, Worship. Mine's a process question. The recommendations as drafted for the report lie on the table, or the recommendation is that the report lie on the table, and then there are 2 subsequent parts of that motion to make decisions. based on the paper. And I just wonder whether they can coexist. So either it lies on the table or we make a decision on it. Well, and my understanding is that's what's been indicated to be moved. So that's my question.
As a subsequential motion.
No, Neil, as I understand it, the recommendations that are on the order paper are what Councillor Wilson is moving. Is that right, Councillor Wilson?
It is indeed.
Right.
I'm happy to speak to it if I get a seconder.
So, I know there's a subsequent motion being indicated by Councillor Davis, but we'll deal with the first one, the recommendation first. So, are there any further questions? Councillor Garrett.
I have real concerns about this because our harbour assets seem to be under attack at the moment in various ways around the periphery of the harbour, and there are a lot of organisations involved, and it is quite a complex scenario, particularly this one. My question to you, and thank you for your work on this, my question to you is around the second recommendation B. Notes that staff will continue to work with the Aramoana community on future options. What specifically does that mean? So really, in the event of it being demolished, if I was in the community, I'd want to know specifically what assurance you could give in that regard. What are the specifics of that working with?
So, with regards to supporting, if the council resolved to remove the Aramoana wharf, and we've indicated we'd look to salvage as much as we could, a process of whether it was reinstated at the current location or somewhere else in the harbour. Our recommendation is to continue to support the Aramoana Trust with the work that they've done in the past. They've been spent many hours and years looking at restoring the wharf, and we would look to still work with them to support them through processes.
Would you agree that once it's gone, it's much harder to get it back?
No.
Councillor O'Malley.
Just to get back to this pier again, the one that's left, the one pile that's on the beach. Are you saying that DOC would actually say that that pile, even though it exists now, is now in contravention of their position on that land, that they can't use that pile even if it's good, even if it's standing there?
We can't speak for DOC specifically on this element. We haven't talked to them about a single pile left on the site and what that would require. But we have been indicated that if that pile were to stay where it is, any new wharf project were to proceed, it would require a concession.
So, with the rest of the wharf out past the conservation land, if they were to be able to work from the water and re-establish the wharf from having to come in from the water because DOC won't let them come in from the land, and actually bring the wharf back into good condition, we'd be left with a pile that DOC's not happy with. That we still have to get permission, even though it's in good condition and now attached to a perfectly good wharf because it was built from the sea, because we didn't have to go from land to build it.
Look, I think we'd be looking at a concession regardless, and we'd be looking at working through that process regardless. It's a question of access rather than condition or nature of the pile.
Just let it fill up.
Sorry.
Wait like this.
I'll go and buy
Any cheese.
Speaking of health and safety risks.
Get everyone here at the chair.
My God, Paul, screw out. Did you not read the tier limit on that vehicle?
I want to tease out a couple of issues here, because I need to understand a bit better. I think we all do. I take it that because it's been identified as a health and safety risk, there is liability on council, potentially. So,
yes.
So the liability would normally rest with the chief executive as the head of the council. If council, and maybe this is something that only Christy or Sandy can answer, but if council decides not to take staff advice on the liability, where does it then lie?
So the position is that the council would still be the person in control of the business or undertaking. And in that situation, the organisation will be liable as a corporate, but it's also possible that although elected members can't be prosecuted, that there could be an adverse finding during the council's audit process against the decisions of elected members.
So the criminal and or civil liability would be held against the council as an organisation,
correct,
not against the councillors.
Correct. So councillors cannot be prosecuted under the new health and safety legislation. However, that doesn't mean that you're immune from any other legal consequence. One of those consequences is that every year when the council has its audit, you are required to report on circumstances where the council has not complied with legislation. And in a situation where the organisation is being prosecuted, it'll be very difficult to avoid that conclusion being drawn.
Thank you. Now, there's a couple of other questions I want to ask about the practicalities of restoration. I take it that, I mean, there's been some speculation about the possibility of using an existing pile, but the engineer's report seems to say, look, the likelihood is they all have to go and you'd have to start from scratch. So whether it's rebuilt or restored, it's the same thing. It has to go first.
Yes, that's our understanding.
All right. Councillor, is there Councillor Hall?
With the rest of the piles, they'll be in the tide, are they? You got the one on the land, which is on dock land, and the rest are in the tide. So therefore, that area land's not controlled by dock. So therefore, it could be rebuilt without having to do it from the sea. It could be rebuilt from a permit from ORC to use the tidal area to get to and from it.
Sandy, I think...
That's not the case while the mean high water mark is normally the measure. In this case, it's the low water mark because of the special nature, as I understand it, of the reserve in that area.
But also the council's reorganisation order of 1989 gave the council jurisdiction down to the low water mark and over the entirety of the structure.
Councillor Benson-Pope.
I just recall the photos provided to us during the forum of people avoiding the barriers and sitting on the structure, fishing or whatever. And given the nature of the engineer's report, which alerts us to the danger of imminent collapse at any time, I was wondering if, irrespective of what decision we make, you're going to take urgent steps to actually do something to make even more explicit warning on the structure, both from the seaside and from the beach, of the danger of going anywhere near that rotten timber. Irrespective of what the outcome of this discussion is going to be, it's unlikely that any removal, were that to happen, would happen in the next day, week. Well, it's just that in the meantime, some extra signage might be good. Can you clarify that?
Yes, we can look at some signage.
I don't understand the answer to that question.
Well, I understand. I was just told they could
Were you asking if more barriers were going to be put up?
Well, I don't know what the outcome of the discussion is going to be, but it seems to me that people are bypassing the barriers and or warnings. I think one thing we should do, irrespective of any other decision, is put some very rudimentary but unequivocal signage on both sides of the thing saying, do not go near this at peril of death.
My understanding was that your premise was that it couldn't be, if we do make a decision to demolish it, that it couldn't be done immediately. And
well, it's just that that's on the basis of the way this organisation responds to anything.
No, I'm trying to get to the bottom of this, because if it can be removed immediately, then clearly we don't need to go outside. So that's what I want to answer to.
So if the resolution were to remove the wharf, we believe we could act before Christmas?
Well, that reinforces my point. It's still a little while till Christmas, a few more sleeps. So it might be a sunny day and someone might sit on it and not know that it's about to be bowled if it doesn't fall from under them.
Councillor Staines.
Just coming back to the photographs that are in the report, it says in here, you've just made the comment that all the piles have to go, they're all unsafe, but it says in here the walkway is in moderate condition. What does moderate mean? Does it mean that it's still okay? It is deteriorating, but it's okay. Clearly, the wharf itself, the bit at the end, is not okay. And following on from that, your view is still that if repairs were made to the wharf, not the walkway, that would require a dock concession. If the repair could be done from the sea, not from the land, then does it need a dock concession?
Excuse me, Councillor, if I can be clear. We have an unpermitted structure without a concession, and we have engineering advice that this structure could fail at any time. We need both a permit from the regional council for it to remain or for it to be rebuilt. We need a concession from DOC for it to remain or for it to be rebuilt. And that concession doesn't just apply to where the wharf is located or how the wharf is accessed when it is being built. It applies to the actual physical access of people to the wharf across the land, not just boats coming up and up.
So the reality is this report is surplus to requirements, because what you're telling me is DOC says we will not allow that pile to stay there, the thing has to go, unless you can get a concession, and by the way, it's going to be a pretty fraught process to get a concession. So the reality is that, by the sound of it, from what we're hearing, that in fact it's a lost cause, because it'll be highly unlikely we'll get a concession in a notified way.
Yes.
Is that the message?
Councillor White.
Sorry, but I'm unclear based on that, because am I not incorrect that the public forum asked for the time to go and see if they could get a dock concession?
Yeah, I believe that's correct.
Sorry?
I asked for council to lodge an application for one.
Or to...
Hang on. You answer the question.
So yes, they asked that council, being that we've accepted ownership of it, and we lodged a concession for the restoration of the wharf.
For them to undertake the work?
Correct.
So what is the time frame for, usually, or you would anticipate, for a dock concession to come through?
If it is a notified process that has some submissions against it, it could be a lengthy process involving hearings and further consultation.
Okay. So the real issue, as I'm trying to understand, see it at the moment, is the timing that may take, or the fact that actually someone could get hurt accessing or using the wharf is the issue?
So it's not just someone accessing the wharf. If the wharf was to collapse, you'll have floating debris, which is a marine hazard for boats using the channel through out to the harbour or out into the wider harbour. And it's that risk that is not capable of being mitigated no matter how much signage is put up or put in place. And once the debris is floating or perhaps below the surface of the water, it's not possible to recover it, I think is the advice that you're being asked to consider.
Okay, I'm just trying to weigh up the advice I've got here in the paper versus the information we heard at Public Forum. And I'm just trying to get an understanding. The people at Public Forum obviously believe that this still has some integrity, it's an asset, and it can be...
Sorry, I need to ask the questions.
I'm sorry,
Yes.
I don't know which way I'm asking.
So if I could comment on that, your decision as a council is to balance that wish and that deeply held desire with the engineering advice, which is giving you confirmation, professional confirmation that there is a live hazard, and it's one that really can't be dealt with necessarily any other way than removing the hazardous parts of that structure.
Okay, so if I voted in supporting and saving the wharf for a short term and into the period of going through a dock concession, is there importance to the DCC to really reinforce the barrier and signage around it to ensure that it's safe, that nobody can access it?
So I understand from Ms Stokes that you'd have to get a permit and you'd have to make it safe. And again, a barrier will not prevent the marine hazard necessarily. So the barrier will be effective for preventing people walking on the structure. The engineering report has advised you that wave action may cause the collapse of the structure, and that's where your marine hazard exists.
Okay.
So you're weighing up probably a risk of a boat being punctured or damaged in some way that means that it sinks in the harbour, potentially.
So, you know, I'm sorry, I'm trying to get this quite clear in my mind. So the fear and the reason we're looking at the MWH report and the engineer report is not, the number one priority is that there is a feeling for this paper to come to council with urgency as such that there's imminent that it will fall into the water as a boat is passing or something on that factor. Not that the fact that somebody is going to hurt themselves accessing water. I'm trying to weigh out which is the most important. That's what I'm trying to...
Both of those things are a risk.
The point is that they're both a liability to council. If either of those happened, we're in the chiefs in the gun. That's fine.
And you have seen in the report that the viable parts of the wharf can be taken away and preserved and used in a reconstruction at a point in time when the wharf is, agreements are made, concessions are obtained, so the parts of the walkway that are still in viable condition can be preserved, paragraph 14 of the report. So we're not saying set fire to the whole thing and let it just drift away. We're saying deconstruct it, take away everything that is a shipping or a personal risk and hazard, preserve the parts of the wharf that are viable, and continue to work with the trust, with the trust around conservation plan, a rebuild plan, and getting the concessions and so on, which, as you know, will be appealed because there are members of the community that are passionately opposed, just like there are others that are passionately for this project.
Yeah, okay. Sorry, I'm just... So I've got to really... the decision I've got to make in my mind, as I said, is that I've got to weigh up what I've got in the report versus what we were presented at Public Forum.
So you've got a professional engineer's report telling you that the wharf is a health and safety risk, and you've got a passionate group of local people who want to rebuild the wharf. Those things aren't mutually exclusive. You can eliminate the health and safety risk and save the part of the wharf for the rebuild project.
Councillor Laufisa.
So I'm just referring to the recommendation from the public forum. And number one is that the report on the table, yours, lie on the table until a determination from the Department of Conservation has been received. So what you're basically telling us is it's likely to be the DOC determination is likely to be not turned down, but basically
contested?
Or
it's likely to be contested. It's got to be a publicly notified process, and we know when we discussed this the first time, quite a number of members of the public came to us and said they didn't want people using the wharf to be walking along what is a fragile environment. So I think both sides acknowledge it will be a contested process. That just means it will take time. So meanwhile, you run the risk of the whole thing falling into the sea and losing even the viable part of the wharf, or you can take it apart, put it away and protect it.
Yeah, thank you.
Councillor Benson Pope.
Can I just ask the Chief Executive, Mr Mayor, if the recommendation that I understand Councillor Wilson has moved also includes the recovery of usable, reusable material?
The way it's worded
It
doesn't specifically, but actually we would be happy to do that, so add that recommendation by all means.
That might make our
Absolutely,
intention clearer.
absolutely.
Well, with the agreement of the mover and seconder, I'd like to make such a suggestion.
Well, you can
Excellent.
second it.
Oh, all right. I'll ask the mover then if she'd go back on mute and agree.
Councillor Wilson, you keeping up?
I am still here, but I'm about to sign up because the girls are talking out of the chair, so apologies.
Fall asleep.
So if we add recommendation C, which is direct staff through the process to proactively preserve the viable parts of the wharf.
And not having spoken to the motion,
The motion hasn't been put yet, we're still in question time.
Oh, well, as soon as you do, I'll
So,
move a procedural motion.
I'd like to get through the rest of the questions. I appreciate there's a number of aspects to this which make it a little bit complex, but Councillor Hawkins has his hand up for a question, and then Councillor Staines.
Yeah.
Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify whether the intention of staff in the recommendations around supporting the trust on any further endeavours to establish, etc., included a council lodging and go on. Are you done? Council lodging and progressing with the concession process. Is that it?
Yeah, yes it does.
Too late to remember the standing orders, I guess.
Yes, it does.
Right. So it was always. So regardless, it's staff's intention for us to resource and progress with the concession process, whether it's a restoration or a rebuild. Okay. Thanks.
Councillor Staines.
Looking for a compromise here. If our decision was to actually be that the deck of the wharf is removed, that the piles which are unsafe and unable to stand under their own structure are removed, the ones that are strong enough to be safe are left standing, and the walkway is left standing because its condition is safe. People could go onto the walkway without causing a problem until such time as the concession process is run. So that addresses the issue of getting rid of the danger, because the structurally unsafe pieces have been removed, but the structurally safe pieces have been left until such time as that concession process has been run. Would that potentially be an option?
We would need to seek engineering advice to understand whether or not that were an option or not, but you would end up with a walkway.
No, the engineering report does state that one of each of the 8 piers, of 7 of the 8 piers, is actually structurally unsound, so you wouldn't have enough piles to support a walkway. So whilst we could retain whilst we could salvage what we could from it, And whilst it does say that the walkway is in a moderate condition, that is relative to the rest of the structure.
That is a little bit at a difference to what I have just heard, that the walkway is safe in its current form. The wharf is not safe in its current form. I'm wondering whether we have actually got enough information to make a decision. It seems to me that there are questions that just can't be answered. Maybe we shouldn't be doing it.
Right. Are there any more? Councillor O'Malley.
I'm just referring to a document that we saw in the public forum to a Community Environment Committee recommendation that came from June 2015, which included that the DCC would conduct concession negotiations with DOC, and that's been 18 months ago. So what concession negotiations have been carried out, and when were they initiated?
So there was an initial concession meeting with DOC and staff following that meeting. In March of this year, council staff met with the league, the trust and other members that are opposed to the wharf, and spent some time with both groups trying to find a middle ground and a solution for a way forward that would mean that all parties would be in support of the wharf restoration. Unfortunately, we weren't able to come to an agreed solution and way forward, which again then indicates that the groups in the community that are against the wharf would oppose the concession through a DOC notification process.
Okay, so you did actively seek a concession?
Yes, and then following that we had the structural report commissioned and redone in July 2006 this year.
Okay.
Do you have another question?
Jeandy, can you tell us what kind of split there is in the community? I mean, do you get a sense that the majority of the community want to retain the wharf or restore it? Or is it not that clear?
I don't think that's something I can comment on, sorry. I don't have that information at hand.
Right, Councillor Hall.
Have you got an estimated cost for the removal of it?
In the report.
We have a lump sum proposal.
Have you ever looked at what it would cost to replace those 7 piles that aren't there and secure the wharf to it?
No.
Because that could be an alternative, depends which is the more expensive, pulling the wharf down or replacing those 7 piles and tying the existing wharf to the 7 piles.
I think the engineer's report says that it's not possible, that if you were to want to rebuild the wharf, you would have to replace everything. That's the bottom line is, and I think this was made quite clear, so I think we're grasping at straws here a bit. What was made quite clear is, in order to have another wharf there, whether you call it restored or new, you have to demolish what's there.
I was looking for the health and safety aspect of it. If we were to put in enough poles to secure what's there and make it safe, because by the sound of it, the outer piles are rotted off, the in ones are still acceptable for reuse.
The outer piles have rotted off completely.
Yes.
The condition of the other piles is not known.
Yep. Yeah, because if we replace the outer piles from seaward side and secured the wharf to it, could take away a health and safety problem until it comes to rebuild.
So the difficulty with that option is that you still need a concession and you still need a permit. A coastal permit is what I'm advised. So the issue about the delay doesn't change no matter what your mitigation strategy is.
Okay. We've got through the questions. So it's been moved, Councillor Wilson, seconded Councillor Benson-Pope, with the amendment, as in the order paper, with the amendment that it makes it quite clear, as I understand, that anything retrievable will be in the event of it being demolished. Is that? Yeah. Do you wish to speak to this? Well, Councillor Wilson, you moved this. She's gone.
Well, I just have one other question. Sorry, the matter that's been raised towards the end of the conversation in respect of proceeding with the concession, independent of whatever this decision is. And that trouble with that, because we've heard, and it's one of the factors in the decision, that the concession might be one thing, but paying for the appeal around the objections to it is quite another. So is that in any way avoidable if we are to support the community's wish to have the building, the structure reinstated? I guess it's not.
Is it avoidable to not have to pay for the appeal process?
No, well,
not really. I mean, it depends on how many people
Warrington
appeal.
Rocks here.
Yes, I understand. All of us.
Right, then I don't wish to make any further comment.
Right, further speakers. Councillor Vance.
I have a great deal of sympathy for staff in having to come to us with this recommendation, because plainly it's our staff's responsibility to give us the best advice that they can that will limit our liability in this case. And I accept everything that they say, and I agree that there is some degree of risk there. Having said that, Stephen Fry famously said, health and safety are the two most dangerous words in the English language. And there have been a lot of opportunities, especially recently, that have been missed because health and safety reared its ugly head and everybody leapt backwards and did what health and safety required. My understanding is that the staff have been completely open and have presented what they are required to as our advisors. But I believe that the Aramoana Charitable Trust have also suggested that A, the risk is not great. It's been there for a very long time. And what the Aramoana Trust seem to me to be saying, and I hope I've got this right, is that they're just asking for a little bit of time. They accept the report, but they just would like it to lie on the table until a determination from the Department of Conservation has been received. And then, of course, we run into the extra problems of cost and the likelihood of appeal, and the figure of $20,000 has been wielded, and that's obviously going to be an issue. But the lodgement of an application to the Department of Conservation for a concession to enable access, construction and occupation, as they ask for in their second recommendation, is going to be required anyway, because they want to be able to build this thing later. And if we keep some bits and pieces that they can reuse, all the good. But I believe that this application to the Department of Conservation is something that's probably going to happen anyway. So for me, it comes down to accepting completely what staff have said and recognising that it's true. There is a risk for us. There is some liability there. But then looking at the potential and hope that the Aramoana Charitable Trust have, they can actually do something, do a considerable amount, in fact, with what is there. Piles rust above the waterline when the oxygen gets to them. Below the waterline, different story. Your engineer is always, when push comes to shove, going to be very conservative. And again, there's a health and safety issue there, and I'm sure the engineer has done his appropriate job in saying, well, actually, no, we can't guarantee any of it. I would still like to think that we could give the Aramoana Trust a little bit more time, accept the report and leave it lie on the table as they request, and immediately lodge the application to the Department of Conservation and see what comes out of that. It may cost us $20,000, it may not actually yield us anything, but then it may actually also give the Aramoana Charitable Trust the leg up that it needs to actually make this thing happen. So, I mean, I'm unusually torn between wanting to accept the council recommendation and wanting to accept what the Aramoana Charitable Trust want us to do, which I understand to be simply delay a little and run the risk of a very small amount of risk. Thank you.
Further speakers?
Well, just a technical thing. I'm not sure the C, as it's worded, is entirely helpful. Proactively preserving the viable parts of the wharf doesn't make it clear that we're talking about taking bits away for reuse. Rather, I mean, that could be interpreted to mean yeah, well, I've suggested to recover all reusable material or some such. And I think we can just, in the interests of plain language, get rid of proactive.
Yeah. Further speakers?
If that's all right with the mover.
Right, well, I acknowledge that this is a really difficult process, or difficult to get, because there are so many variables at play here. But it seems to me there are one thing we know is that council is at risk now. It has a liability, and it's a very serious potential liability, as has been acknowledged. That's the first thing. There's the second thing is that the process, any process to keep the wharf, any parts of it, or to do anything with it, will be long, they'll be contested, and they'll be expensive, and we may eventually have to go through that. But I keep coming back to the fact that what the engineering report says, and there's a danger actually around this table that we all try and come up with some kind of engineering solution ourselves. What the engineer is saying to us is, for anything to happen there, that's got to be taken out first. It's got to be demolished. There's no, that we can retrieve it, but the bottom line from what I get from the report is, you will not rebuild anything, or restore anything, or build anything new at all without taking everything that's there away. So if I put the two things together, the fact that it has to be moved at some point in order to do anything, and the fact that any concession process is going to be long, then I'm really inclined to accept the staff's recommendation, because the longer it stays there, the more risk there is and liability to council. And I don't think we can afford to ignore staff's advice on that. So that's where I'm coming from. Are there any further speakers? If there are none, I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? No. No. Division, I think.
Aye.
No.
No.
Aye.
No.
No. Aye.
No.
No.
Aye. No.
No.
Aye.
Sorry, lost class.
Okay. We need to do something. I can't. This cannot just.
Sorry. Can we check the vote, please?
So, is there another Councillor Vanders?
The subsequent motion, which I hope to propose, is very close to what the Aramana Charitable Trust have given us in a separate piece of paper. It has 3 items on it. That the report lie on the table until a determination from the Department of Conservation has been received. That the Council immediately lodge an application to the Department of Conservation for a concession to enable access, construction and occupation, something I think is going to happen anyway, and that Council requests staff to arrange for additional barriers to be erected to address the public access issues raised in the WH report. I would like to modify it slightly and add Councillor Benson Pope's suggestion that in addition to the extra barriers we have very clear signage added, something that was said that could be done. And also I would like some limit on the time that the report lie on the table. It says in the recommendation from the Aramoana Charitable Trust that until a determination for the Department of Conservation has been received. I wouldn't like to think that that's going to take months. And I wonder if a reasonable time limit on that might be 2 months, 3 months. Is that a possible time that we could get a determination from?
Ms. Graham wants to give us some. Councillor Wilson, did you want to speak?
Sorry,
pardon me.
Was this my earlier procedural question? Either this lies on the table or it doesn't. And it would need to be uplifted at the next council meeting.
Exactly, that's what's wrong.
But I don't think we can have something lie on the table and make a decision about it at this meeting. So that it just seems, which I understand as being
rejected. So, Ms. Graham, I would need some advice on that. It's a good point, so I need some advice on that.
I'll just talk with the fashion something that will give effect to what Councillor Vandervis is speaking and deal with Councillor Hawkins' concerns. It would just take a minute.
So we can refer the report to...
I'd refer it to... If you lay it on the table, it will expire the next council meeting. So just don't do that.
Right.
So returning to the report and the outcome of the legislation. No. So refer that we have a recess for 2 weeks. Check with Ruth.
it would appear we're in chorus.
They're all still in the room.
I think they're technically in the lobby.
Did you want to... Because I don't think I was going to...
That was just the application.
Time to go home.
Business comes to the centre of stop.
We're accepting this one.
Let's get on with it.
So, I've been advised that the resolution that's put is not viable. So, but I'm also advised that Councillor Staines that he is looking at finding alternative. So I'm going to suggest that we have Councillor Staines. How long do you need?
3 days. 3 days. Councillor Staines.
I'm going to move from the chair, second to Councillor White, that we adjourn for 5 minutes. All those in favour, please say aye.
Wait, no. Why don't we just...
Right, we'll get underway again, and the Chief Executive is going to explain the reality of the situation that the previous vote has put us into, or more precisely, her into.
Look, none of this is ideal, and my legal advisor now says that I should remove it tomorrow under my emergency powers, because otherwise where you can't be prosecuted, I carry the sole risk for the organisation for potentially a $500,000 fine if something goes wrong. So, pardon me? Yes, maybe. And obviously I'm not that keen on that, and I don't imagine you are either. I would propose that we do this by way of compromise. That we approve the partial removal of the Aramoana Wharf due to the posed risk to health and safety. That we direct staff during the removal process to remove the walkway and preserve it, and to leave in place any piles that are found to be in good condition. That we remove all rotten parts of the wharf, including piles. The walkway, which can't hang on nothing, or rotten piles, is preserved and can be put back. B says we'll work with the community to get the concessions, to get the permits, to rebuild the wharf using the stored, which we will store at our own expense. Is that acceptable to you guys? Yep. Does that seem acceptable to everybody? So the only difference is you might end up with between 1 and 8 piles that are in good condition left in place as markers for where the old wharf was.
We stay here much longer, we'll have more than that.
Piles?
Oh,
so I'll type that up, but can you, if you're happy with, oh yeah, I think it's in place.
Now, Sandy, I just need some guidance now on, because I appreciate that the standing orders don't allow for a complete revocation of a previously agreed. So, is what the Chief is suggesting is viable?
It's not inconsistent with what you've already passed.
Right. Okay. Then my suggestion is that we take a motion from Councillor Benson Pope to extend the meeting, because we've gone nearly for 6 hours. We move on to the next items while the Chief is writing up the resolution that's going to be Councillor Wild.
Can I just ask if the Chief could add some to the fact that the Council will immediately or within 3 months lodge an application to the Department of Conservation?
Well, you tell her that. But I'd like to move on now.
In terms of Standing Order 4.2, I move that the meeting be extended beyond the 6-hour limit.
Second.
Second to Councillor Staines.
Aye.
All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. Okay, now, in the interest of getting through everything without it taking all night, we'll move on to the review of the reserves bylaw, item 9.
Move.
Councillor Benson Pope. Is there a seconder? Second.
So all three are now
Councillor
different.
Hall.
The approval of the statement of proposal on page 56.
Sorry?
It's the recommendations on page 56.
So this is the recommendation on page 56. That's what your move has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Councillor Hawkins.
Question really, and it's around the apparent relitigation of the dog control bylaw, which isn't particularly explained in the paper. I'm just wondering, again, with an eye on the work program in the coming years, why we are doing that 1 year after going through that process.
Yeah, we will come back to you about the dog control bylaw. There's been feedback from a number of quarters that the process accidentally removed some areas of dog walking areas that were valuable to members of the community inadvertently, and we do need to rectify that, and so we will take some feedback from the dog walking community as we do that in order to make sure that the dog walking bylaw is as good as it can be. So it's not huge, we're hoping, but we do need to fix it. So
is it so not huge that it can be dealt with as an amendment rather than reopening the entire bylaw for the special concern?
We will look at it, but I doubt it.
Councillor Banks.
Just wondering if we have a very clear definition of beaches. How are they defined?
So look, the bylaw's been proposed in a form that leaves it open. That was because at this stage we're looking at consultation, and when people are telling us what spaces they do and don't want to be included under the bylaw, we can revisit more and put more precision into the definition. At this point, the bylaw is crafted in such a way that anything from land down to the mean high water springs would be considered a beach, whether it's sand, gravel, rock, planted, in whatever form it is.
And that is regardless of ownership? You're talking about
Correct.
physical definition?
Correct.
So you could actually, this bylaw could actually apply to privately owned land near the sea?
Yes, that is one possible outcome. However,
Not
there are
a
exceptions.
welcome one, is it?
There are exceptions in the bylaw, and my understanding is that there aren't any privately owned beaches in Dunedin, but and then there's reserve land, which we often lease or licence, and people who hold a lease or licence of our reserve land, the bylaw doesn't apply in those circumstances.
What do we do about my concern that I know of privately owned land which would fit most descriptions of a beach?
So the definition, if I read it to you, says reserve or beach means any open space, park, garden or land set apart for public purpose. When land is privately held, it would fall outside that definition because it's not held for a public purpose.
Great, so we've got no issue with private property owners being caught by this particular bylaw?
Correct, but we are open to those people submitting to us and giving more precision to that definition if they seek it.
Thank you very much obliged.
Councillor Benson.
Well, just a matter of fact, Mr Chairman, I understand there are in fact, there's certainly one privately owned beach on the seaside of the Otago Peninsula. I don't think it's going to be caught by the bylaw, and it will certainly wash out, but it's surfaced, so to speak, in previous discussions, so it's not accurate to say there aren't any.
Okay. Are there any other speakers to this? Councillor Staines.
Just a question, Christie. Councillor Wilson had, there was some amended resolutions from those that are in the papers. Are we voting on the amended resolutions or the ones in the paper?
So at the moment, what's being moved is the recommendations in the paper, and Councillor Wilson has proposed some alternative recommendations. Basically, if Pam can pull them up, she has a copy of those. What it relates to is ensuring that we include reference to the Land Transport Act when we're describing what legislation we're making this bylaw under. And that is to clarify that we have the authority to pass the speed limits that are proposed for vehicles on beaches.
So, just to clarify that, these are not in conflict. These additional resolutions are not in conflict with the ones on the order paper.
Correct.
Happy to include them.
So, if the mover and seconder, Councillor Hall and Councillor Benson Pope, are happy, they can be included in this resolution. Okay. So, as I understand it, they were around the ability to do this within the acts, the legislation that was cited. Councillor Wilson identified the need to cite other legislation, as I understand it, to enable us to do all that we want to. Yeah. Okay. All right, any other speakers? There are. All right, I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Okay, we'll go back to the. Now, I know that this is being moved. You're moving this, Councillor Staines, and who's seconding it? Councillor O'Malley. I appreciate that you're moving and seconding it, but it might be quite good for the chief, since she has scripted it, to explain it. It might be the most economical way.
So all three of them have been slightly changed. The first one says it's approving the partial removal, not the total removal. The second one, we've switched the order. The second one specifies during the removal process that we leave in place any piles that are found to be in good order, and we recover and store the usable parts, the reusable parts from the wharf. And the third one adds that we immediately apply for the dock concession.
Okay. Is there anything that needs to be said that hasn't already been said about this? Good. Then I'm going to...
I'm sorry, but proactively leaving in place is a bit of a stretch for the imagination. So can we take out the proactively? I mean,
Leave in place.
Please, in the interests of plain language.
Yeah, just take out the word proactively. It's redundant. And as well, it's unnecessary. Right, I'm going to put it. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried.
See, we got there in the end.
On to item 10, resolution to stop a portion of Netherby. Thanks, Judy. Moved Councillor Benson Pope. Seconded. Yep. Councillor Lord. Richard, you might be able to sit down for a couple of seconds if we're really lucky. Any questions on this? Councillor Vanders.
Sorry, just briefly, do I understand that there was already a garage built over this area of land?
That's correct, there's already a garage on the land.
And is there been, was it a mistake? Did they think they owned it and found out later, or was it something naughty that was done?
It was actually a previous owner that had constructed it, and the new owner approached council to ask the question and has subsequently applied for the stopping the road to legalise the...
Right, thank you. Clears the air for me.
We have a number of others of these in the pipeline as well.
Thank you. Is there any discussion? I'll put all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes. Submission on the proposed marine protected areas, 89. Now I note that this is not so much a submission on whether this council supports marine protected areas. It's about ensuring that our rights to discharge, etc., are not taken into account. That's my understanding of it. Who of staff is Sandy?
We'll be speaking to here, but Ruth and I between us is probably common.
Make stuff up. See what you do.
So, are there any questions to start with? Anybody?
Happy to move.
Councillor Vanders.
Does it affect any of the stormwater or other discharges that we currently require that were challenged under 6A by the ORC?
The key concern is just ensuring that any changes or augmentation to the network, that ability is preserved.
So to give us flexibility ongoing?
Yes.
And this recommendation does that?
Yes, it's what we believe the submission does, both for stormwater and for wastewater.
Thank you.
No further questions. Been moved, Councillor Staines, seconded Councillor Newell. Any discussion? Put all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Yes.
Getting there.
Item 12. Administration delegation is manual.
You need a bell.
Page 100.
Cite it.
Move.
I'll go from 11 to 13. Number 12's not here.
Sorry, it was just a technical glitch with the numbering system.
Are there any questions?
If I could just, councillors would have received a replacement 2 pages to deal with the, there'd been an error with the toys record and also in how the structure had been drawn at the back. So they've been remedied in the pages for the supermarket.
Okay, it's been... Are there any questions, Councillor Hall? Oh, it's been moved, but you can second it. All right. It's been moved, Councillor Wiley, seconded Councillor Hall. Any discussion? Good. I'll put it. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Page number 65, points to outside organisations.
Happy to move.
Moved Councillor Staines, seconded Councillor Wiley.
We got a
Any discussion on this? Any questions? I haven't found it yet.
Silent.
All right. I'll put all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. And that is the end of the agenda. Thank you very much for your stamina.